Every spawn room has a resupply cabinet, which heals you and reloads all your weapons. What if it was a playable class? This sounds insane and very OP, so I tried it, and learned that it's really not that crazy, actually. The biggest factor being the cabinet only resupplies every 3 seconds. You're only healed back to full, weapons reloaded, every 3 seconds, and 3 seconds is plenty of time to die. In 3 seconds, a soldier can shoot 4 rockets. A pyro can do 400 damage. A demo can shoot 6 pipes. And a heavy can do 1500 damage. All this meant that in actual gameplay, players still needed to pay attention since the gap between resupplies is big enough to be a serious risk. There's a sniper, NG, medic, and spy huddled in this corner, and despite having a resupply here, they all get turned into ash. This heavy has a resupply backing him up, but also gets incinerated. Resupplies also don't stack. They can heal each other, but having multiple resupplies on one guy doesn't do anything, since the cooldown is global across all resupplies. This red heavy is being healed by a medic and 2 resupplies, but he's still just being resupplied every 3 seconds, so he still dies when 2 demos walk in and lay a few stickies. So if you thought the resupply would make everyone invincible, that's not what actually happens. Though you're also not that far off. While players didn't become unkillable, they definitely stayed alive way longer than usual. The resupply has the health and regen of a medic, so it's easy for them to die. But not that easy. They have enough to take risks and position themselves close to the fight. So there'd basically always be a resupply sitting around the edges of the major choke points. And if you're not dumb, you can usually back up to the resupply and walk it all off. This then made the game super teamfight centric, which is what I think is the resupply's biggest effect on the game. If anything that doesn't kill you can be easily healed, then one person can't really move the needle. The only thing that can progress the game then are big team fights, since that's the only way people are taking enough damage quickly enough to actually die. This resulted in most games seeing long, intense fights that end with one team getting wiped. This fight for Steel's first point is a good example of this. 3 blue players died in the lead up to the point capture, but red wiped with just 4 survivors. All of the main game modes were tested, and this effect never went away. So that's the resupply versus the game as a whole. As for you as a player, the resupply also had an impact. First off, the ability to be resupplied anywhere means you can be so much more oppressive than normal, most clearly seen with demo. Here is a blue demo pushing into the last point of Stage 2 Dust Bowl, where they end up shooting 16 pipes and 40 stickies, all at the cost of 0 seconds reloading, which eventually led to red team crumbling and blue team taking the point. Blue team was capping point E, and this blue demo shot 17 stickies non-stop at the door. Another example is the airstrike, which could now be relentlessly spammed into doorways. The big reload after emptying your clip and the health loss from rocket jumping all become non-issues thanks to the resupply. This was most abused on Dust Bowl, where blue team have to literally fight out of a trench to leave spawn. The black box was surprisingly good, since the resupply negates your nerfed clip size, and you basically get healing for free, which makes you much trickier to take down. Cow Mangler charge shots weren't bad, though very dependent on having cover that plays into you shuffling up and peeking a shot through. Not needing to reload doesn't fix being exposed and eating spam because you move at a snail's pace. Also easy to counter with a short circuit. Pyro's Thermal Thruster didn't have a crazy spike in power, but it was notably better because you can refill your charges with the resupply, so Pyros can go fly everywhere. Defensively, the Rescue Ranger was really good, and with a short circuit, it's so much effort to take you down. Here's a snippet of an engineer abusing it on Barn Blitz last. Yet somehow, not this nor the sticky spam were the loadouts that got people furious. The strat that got lovingly called an angry swarm of mosquitoes was Caber Knight. First off, Caber Knight itself became a lot better with the resupply, because after charging in, they survive a good percentage of the time. So you can hobble back to a resupply, get your explosive, charge and health back, and do it all over again. This would have been impractical before, since you have to walk all the way back to spawn, but you can basically play Caber Knight like any other Demo Knight loadout now. But the Caber really pissed people off because of this industrial assembly line the red team created on Borneo. 3 Caber Knights and a well-positioned resupply behind the rocks. After one charges in, another follows up a few seconds later to cover their retreat, creating a stupid amount of chaos the blue team couldn't keep up with. What made this even worse is that resupplies heal players of any team. So you can charge in, blow people up, use the enemy resupply, and charge out. Besides the Caber, there were 2 other loadouts that took advantage of forcing resupplies to backstab their team. The Dead Ringer could abuse the resupply to infinitely gain cloak, so you can stay invisible as long as you want. And of course, tank damage to brute force your way into backstabs. Though the 3-second resupply cooldown limited how crazy this strat got. Bonk was the other weapon that benefited from resupply triggering for any team, but I'm not sure it did much. Resupply recharges your bonk instantly, but it also cuts off your bonk early, which can be hard to avoid, making you need to drink again, putting yourself at risk. If it all goes well, you can distract people and get behind, or get out of jail for free, but I didn't get the impression that this was powerful. The best at abusing the team neutral triggers though wasn't a weapon, it was Ubers. If you Uber in, you can fire all your shots, then get refilled and keep going, doing way more damage than you otherwise could have. This demo gets Ubered and runs out of ammo soon after, but an enemy resupply bails him out, allowing him to fire 8 more stickies, eventually wiping out the entire nest here, which wouldn't have happened if not for that resupply. And here's an example without Uber. This demo was down to 34 HP, but thanks to the enemy resupply, he's back to full and continues the attack on Red's point. On the more whimsical end, the Sandwich is actually really good at keeping your resupplies alive. Heavy can even be a decent emergency field medic, handing out sandwiches to teammates. Players tried to spam the milk and Jarate, but the resupplies that allowed them to spam it in the first place are also there on the opposite team to immediately clear the effect. Overall, this played out as a net 0. The other thing players could abuse with the resupply was loadout swapping on the fly. Class swapping isn't possible, but you can swap out what you were running. This sounds powerful, but all people could come up with was medigun swapping. If Uber isn't working out, you can swap over to the crits without running back or waiting until you die, which can end up being the difference between a win or a loss. This isn't bad, but it's nothing crazy. The other kinda useful strat was using the jumper weapons to quickly get back in the fight after dying. But again, nothing crazy. There is a strat for Soldier where you charge a conch, since it's the easiest to fill, then swap to the battalions or buff banner. You could also play Demo Knight, then after 4 heads, swap over to grenades, but no one bothered with either of these. Overall though, for all the insane strats, it sounds like the resupply can enable endless demo spam, some super degenerate engineer play, constant airstrike rockets. They were actually pretty limited because you couldn't pull them off very often. In a game of 24 players, there's too much chaos for such precise teamwork with a resupply to happen. It's also hard to say if they're actually good. In the grand scheme of things, most of these strats rely on a resupply dedicated to supporting you, and having the resupply simply run around supporting the entire team might be way more productive, similar to how a medic healing one guy is worse than spreading it around. As for the resupply itself, he coexists well with the medic. His range is set up to match that of the static resupplies in spawn, and he also runs at engineer speed, which means that if you want to make an impact during fights, there is a legitimate need for skillful movement and awareness of incoming damage and spies. It's very easy to misjudge the risks and crumple into sheets of metal. Meanwhile, the Medibeam has a longer range and works better in direct combat. And of course, the resupply can't uber people, which was still incredibly important in the tests to break stalemates. So the resupply and the medic didn't diminish each other. So overall, resupply cabinet with feet. Surprisingly okay.